Got Haley in the booth. We're here. We're in Joshua. I'll have a word of prayer. I'll catch my breath. And we'll get going. Father, thank you for this evening, the chance to fellowship, to meet around the table and just show our manners or our lack of, and just get to know each other a little bit better. We're thankful for that privilege tonight. And I pray that as we come around your word and begin to feast on that this evening, that we will experience that same kind of fellowship and enjoyment that comes when we have an opportunity to listen to you. I pray your Spirit would speak to our hearts in Jesus' name. Amen. Joshua. 3 beginnings in this book. We talked last week about the first one, which is a new leader. That was Joshua. And he's going to take them into a new land. Just a second, let me find it. Yeah. New land. The word land in the book of Joshua occurs 87 times. It's the same land that was promised in Genesis chapter 12. When they come to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. And the Canaanites were in the land. And God said to Abram, I'm going to give you this land. And so Abram built an altar. The third theme of the new beginnings is that of a new life. And what a job he had in store for him, because let's start with the first 5 verses. You got those, Norm? Please, Joshua 1 through 5.
After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses my servant is dead. Now therefore arise, go over to this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. I will not leave you or forsake you.
Okay. Joshua had quite a mentor, didn't he? Just think about this guy. He was the servant of Moses. Been where Moses had been, done what Moses had done, watched him. How could you ever think you were ready after following Moses? I mean, you know, a legend. Greatest of all time. He was a goat. And here he is. Now, Moses doesn't know this. Because remember, Moses got to go up, as we ended Deuteronomy, Moses went up in the mountain and he got to look over into the land. But Joshua has an advantage and a disadvantage. because 40 years earlier, Joshua went where? Into the land. He saw the same thing the other 10 did. Him and Caleb, they saw the same thing the other 10 did. They had a different take on it. But what were some of the things they saw? Giants. That's all we got to say, Chuck. They saw giants. That's because giants are big eaters. They saw giants. He knows that this is going to be a walk in the park. You're not just going to stroll in there and all these people are going to faint and fall over and say, whatever. Yeah. That's not going to happen. Two million people, most all scholars today believe that by the time they got ready to cross this Jordan, there were 2 million people. I was watching a video this afternoon about an Israeli, and he was a Christian Jew, and he was standing at a sign that said the Bridge of Adam, and he said, geography can be a real good thing for us to wrap our minds around. He said, I want you to understand something, and we're going to read about this when we get a little further in. When the Jordan River was at flood stage. And at flood stage, it would be wider than the Mississippi River. And it's not lazy going. It's during a flood. I mean, the water is just raging. When God backed up the water at Adam, and it went all the way to Jericho, this guy gets in an automobile and they're driving at 55 miles an hour down the route that parallels the Jordan. It took him 55 miles an hour. It took him 30 minutes to go from one end to the other where God had stopped that water. That's how far a distance. Can you imagine a distance far enough that would take you 30 minutes going 55 miles an hour? That's a long ways. But you got 2 million people crossing it. You need a lot of room. So he's going to lead these people. And what did he need to know more than anything else? What did Joshua need to know more than anything else?
God is on his side.
God is on my side. Yeah. This is God talking to him. First 5 verses. God, he can be so eloquent. I mean, God's written some of the most beautiful things that you could ever read. But read the first part of verse 2. He didn't sugarcoat that, did he? He says, Moses is dead. Captain Obvious. And
The people were there in shock.
they got to see the mantle passed, and they knew that Joshua was the leader, but you know how it is. When you've got a guy that has been in front of you for 40 years, whether you like him or hate him, you know what you're getting. And I would bet you good money that on the first day when Joshua said, all right, Someone in that group said, that's not the way Moses would have done it. Am I right? That's just how we are. Second guess him. That's not the way Moses would have done it. And when you and I are battling against the world, and we have got some real battles coming up. There is a movement afoot, and it's hard for me to grasp this, but there is a movement afoot that is started, funded, and energized basically all by women, whose only agenda is they want carte blanche to be able to kill babies anytime, anywhere, without remuneration, without any kind of backlash. And they're constantly trying to tell the American people that we've got to have this privilege. We've got to be able to kill our babies because they're an inconvenience. It's our right. That's one thing that we're battling against. There is a bill in Congress right now that's being looked at that wants to give the FCC the ability to listen to a radio program, and if they deem it to be hate speech, that they can cut it right off the airways. That will qualify for religious broadcasting, talk radio, whatever. And one of the biggest red flags of hate speech is the name Jesus. And it's in Congress right now. We are in a battle. And just like Joshua, what we need to know more than anything else is what? God is on our side. That does not mean, Brian and I were talking about this earlier, that does not mean that whatever we want is going to go. That we're going to escape persecution. That we're going to come out of this unscathed. It might mean that some of us lose our lives. God is with us. And that's what we need to know. Man, get a grip. Look at Hebrews 13, 5 and 6. He's going to quote Joshua. And he needed to do that because the writer of the Hebrews was facing persecution to an nth degree. There were people who were just hunting Christians down. And the persecution was getting so tragic, so strong, so intense, that many Jews who had come to Jesus were beginning to renege and said, you know what, we've changed our mind. Stop persecuting us. We don't follow him anymore. And the writer of Hebrews says, listen, don't do it. Don't do it. Hebrews 13, 5 and 6. Tim?
Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said it. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me?
Yes. And in Joshua 1:5, that's how that verse 5 ends. I will not fail you or forsake you. And the word fail there in Joshua is pronounced, we think, rapha. And it means to slacken. God's saying, I'm not going to slacken with you. In Exodus, when they use that word fail, it translates, so he let him drop. In other words, when he says, I will not fail you, God is saying, I'm not going to drop you. And man, that's what we need to hear. It makes it even more in a visual for me. I will never fail you. I will never drop you. When he grabs us, see, when he grabs us, he says, I'm not going to ever drop you. And isn't that good to know? Man, we need that assurance. And then that word forsake, it's word azab, and he's saying, I won't relinquish. I won't abandon. In the height of discouragement, when you have gone through an illness or a disaster or an emergency, and it just keeps going on and on and on, one of the things that Satan is so good at doing is sowing discouragement into your soul. And you just want to quit. You just want to give up. And I have heard so many times Christian people who are going through these experiences in their life say, God has abandoned me. I feel like God has left me by myself. You know, that's tough. And it's hard. To convince them otherwise. Because anything that you can talk somebody into, Satan can talk them out of. And that's why we need to listen to God. Because God says, I will never abandon you. I'll never drop you. And this is what he's telling to Joshua, because God, God says, I know these people, Josh. And I feel sorry for you. Because they are not nice. Okay. And of course, when we're talking about Joshua, the thing that I got fed last week as a line, and I'd heard it so many times before, it still is funny. The only person besides Adam and Eve that didn't have any parents. Joshua, son of Nun. Yeah, that's it. That's my line for today. Okay. Let's start with, Tim, would you read verses 6 through 9?
Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid, Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
Twice in the first two verses, Moses is referred to as how?
My servant. My servant.
Yes, of who?
God.
Servant of the Lord. That's how he was referred to often. Servant of the Lord. Joshua doesn't hold that distinction. In fact, it's not till the end of this book that Joshua is called servant of the Lord. See, that doesn't come easy. That's a title that you earn. And ultimately, the important thing is never the servant. It's the master. That's what counts. And God commissioned Joshua to do three things here. First thing was what?
Strong and courageous. Lead the people.
Yes, lead the people into the land. The second thing, once they got over there, he was supposed to... Huh?
Obey the law.
Obey the law was one. And I'm sorry, I've jumped ahead, but we're still here in the first 5 verses. 3 things. Lead the people in. Second thing, conquer the Canaanites, defeat the enemies. And the third thing, and this is in verse 3. Third thing.
God promises to give him every place he sets his foot.
Every place he sets his foot. Have you ever done that? Anybody here ever done that? Start out walking and claim where you walk for God? Back in 1995 when I first got here, and this land next to us wasn't even up for sale. There was an orchard there then. And I was studying this, and we had lots of dreams back in 95. I walked that whole field. And as I walked, I said, God, give us this land to build something for you. And in 30 years, it was amazing how many times that land came up for sale and never went. And then our plans have changed. And I was made aware of that when I got a call that it had been sold back to an orchard. So I said, okay, God, I got new places to tread, I got new places to walk, I got new places to claim. But I don't think it's out of our line to claim a land and souls for Jesus Christ. And there was a time when we would go into communities and we would walk streets and we would just stand at the end of the driveway and we would pray for the people in those homes that that God would send people into this church. And that's a necessary thing because Satan wants those people. We need to want those people. And I don't think there's anything wrong with claiming that. So, be strong and courageous. As Tim read that, in verse 7, the warning there is what? Yes. And the danger is what?
Being unsuccessful?
Yes. And down in verse 8, it comes to light. You know, and they're going to see this. It was important for the Israelites to continually march forward, because when they stopped conquering, that land was never conquered. And this is a principle that Jeannie and I learned a long time ago. Personally, I'd heard it preached from great preachers in the past. And remember this, after I'm gone and buried, remember this. There is a very great danger in stopping a ministry. Because once you stop it, you might never get it up and going again. In across our country, we have got churches that stop doing Sunday nights, stop doing Wednesday nights. And they would always say, this was years ago, they would always say, when we get a few more people, we'll start up again. And when people go online and come up to this church, when they're Googling, one of the things that they see that makes them come and visit is we're one of the few churches left in Grand Rapids that still has a Sunday night service. One of the few churches. And there was a time when all the churches met Sunday nights. When you stop a ministry, any ministry, it's always a danger because it may never start up again. So that word for success doesn't mean prosperity and good times. It means doing what God's called us to do. In verse 8, what is God's charge to Joshua?
Remember everything that I've written in this book of the law.
Yes, in the book of the law. When Moses got out into the wilderness, and he had 40 years to comprise this, that must have been an amazing sessions that he had with God, because Moses started, and he's going to write the 5 books. In the first book he writes, not one thing happened that he was alive for. 50 chapters. He never saw any of them. He never met Abe, never met Isaac, never met Jacob, never met Joseph, never met Adam and Eve, didn't meet Noah. All of those people. Can you just try and imagine what that must have been like? You're sitting in your tent. God walks in, says, "You got pencil and paper? Are you ready?" And starts dictating the history of the world. And Moses is writing it all down. Then, of course, when we get to Exodus, he learns about the story of his birth. And then, of course, he knew the rest. And then he lived the rest. But he writes all that down, and he says to Josh, "Now, how many times a week would I like you to read that?" God's talking to Joshua, and he says to Josh, how many times a week does God want Josh to read this book?
Every day,
Every day. Just every day?
day and night.
Every night. You know, God, I'm a little busy here. I got 2 million people I'm trying to lead. No, you can do that. I want you to meditate day and night on this book of the law. Wow. You know, the word meditate means to mutter. And so lots of times you would see Jewish people, especially the scribes and the Pharisees, they'd be standing, and of course people would watch them, and they did this for show, but they would be standing with their hands clasped and their lips are moving, but you can't hear anything they're saying. And supposedly they're meditating. I think they're just muttering. So, yeah. Okay. Turn over to Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1. You got it, Joseph? Okay, Luke 1, verse 37. Yes, go back and read verse 37 again. I didn't hear it.
For no word from God will ever fail.
Ah. Chuck, can you look that up in the American Standard Version?
For nothing will be impossible with God.
I think that's the New American Standard Version.
New American Standard.
Yeah. Anybody got American Standard? King James, read that, Gail.
With God, nothing shall be impossible.
Yeah, I like the way Joe had it. I'm looking for another one. American Standard.
I have the same as Joe.
Get your devices out. Come on. American Standard.
What is the American Standard? What's this?
Huh?
What are the letters for the American Standard?
ASV.
ESV?
A. American Standard Version. ASV. It was written in 1901. Year I was born. You got it?
For no word from God shall be void of power.
Yes. That's closer to what Joe read. No word of God shall be void of power. Now, we understand that in the beginning, right? Let there be light, word of God. Power, let there be light, boom. Sun, moon, boom. But think about this. Gabriel is speaking to a teenager and said, you're going to have a baby. She said, how can that be? I'm not even dating. And Gabriel's response was this: for no word from God shall be void of power. Now, Gabriel says, girl, I want you to hear what I'm saying. I'm telling you, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. because you're going to have this. So when God says in verse 9, be strong and courageous, do not tremble or be dismayed. No word from God shall be void of power. Not only was God commanding him, but he was telling him, this is what is going to accompany my words. It's a done deal. It's a done deal.
That's like Isaiah 55, verse 11. So will my word be which goes forth from my mouth, it will not return empty to me, without accomplishing what I desire.
Yes,
I mean, is that the same?
absolutely. When God says something, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And just go back to Deuteronomy 34. And somebody read verse 8 in Not the New American. 34:8. 34. Who's got King James? 34:8.
Gil.
He's looking.
And the children of Israel walked for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days, so the days of weeping and the mourning for Moses were ended.
Well, that's funny. I guess we pick it up in chapter 2. I was thinking in 34:8, the plains of Moab, there was a place called Shittim, and but you find that in chapter 2 and verse 1. This is where they were at, and they're going to go in as the spies. But it's there, 7 miles east of the Jordan. And that word Shittim means acacia. There was a grove of acacia trees, and that's where they had camped. And wherever you set your foot. Now, let me get going here. Renee, would you, in Joshua 1, would you read verses 10 and 11?
So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your supplies ready. 3 days from now you will cross the Jordan, here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own.
Now, Haley, if you can find that map, throw that, there we go. Look at that. That girl is good. And then you got him on your lap. Verse 11, Joshua is telling the Israelites something that they're not used to hearing. Go through the camp and tell them to do what?
Get ready, we're moving.
Get ready, we're moving, but what does it say there in verse 11? Joshua 1:11.
It says they should prepare
3 days' supplies, and they will pass over the Jordan. Now, maybe you will, but you will.
That's right, Pat, that's right. Now, there's no maybe about it, but what would be going through their minds when he says you need to prepare provisions for 3 days?
God's not gonna give us any more manna.
They haven't had to prepare meals for 40 years. Can't you just hear the guys? What does that mean, honey? What do you mean, prepare victuals? Prepare victuals, Chuck?
It's not just a matter of losing memory. The people that are alive weren't alive 40 years ago. They have nothing they forgot. This is something that's never happened before.
Absolutely. And at least their ancestors, those that died in the wilderness, at one point in their life, they had prepared food.
But they're not around anymore.
But they're not around. These kids have never prepared a meal other than what God's been giving them. Manna, 25 ways to cook it.
Burgers.
So, we're going to, Pat, I love the way she said that. We are going to cross the Jordan. He doesn't say, let's organize, let's get some river crossing committees. How about, anybody here know how to build a pontoon? We got some bridge builders handy. We got to get to work. Because we got to get no. He doesn't tell them how it's going to happen. He just tells them it's going to happen. Now.
How about weapons? Don't they want to, be armed or something?
No.
Okay.
They're not going to win this battle. God is.
Now, look at, Renee, read verses 12 through 15.
But to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the command that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you. The Lord your God is giving you rest, and has granted you this land. Your wives, your children, and your livestock may stay in the land that Moses gave you east of the Jordan. But all your fighting men, fully armed, must cross over ahead of your brothers. You are to help your brothers until the Lord gives them rest, as he has done for you, and until they too have taken possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. After that, you may go back and occupy your own land, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you east of the Jordan towards the sunrise.
Matt, please. Okay. See? Reuben, Gad, and then Manasseh is divided into two. There's a Manasseh on this side, just below Dan, and then there's a Manasseh on this side. It's kind of like Rockford East and Rockford West. You've got Manasseh East, Manasseh West. What are those 2.5 tribes, Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh, what are they doing on the wrong side of the Jordan?
They asked for it.
They asked for it. What's up with that?
They wanted to live there. They didn't want to cross, not to live over there.
Yeah, but I thought over there was the promised land.
It was. But wherever your feet walk,
So why are they over here?
They asked for it.
They asked for it. Did they ask God?
No,
they asked Moses.
They asked Moses. Manasseh asked for all the land east of the Sea of Galilee to the north, what was called Bashan. And I think that's on the other side there. No, I hope. I want it to be, but it's not. Bashan, or Bashan. And then Gad asked for everything east of the Jordan in what's called a Gilead. And then Reuben asked for the land of Moab east of the Dead Sea, and that was in the south. So you got two sections. First is the Promised Land, west of the Jordan. That was the Promised Land. Contrast that to the land on the east. It was the land that Moses gave them, not God. Now, in retrospect, we were getting close to Christmas. And your parents come to you and say, Marilee, you've got your choice. You can get a gift from your parents, or you can get a gift from God. Which would you like? And you would say, good. That's a good Sunday school answer right there, God. When we think about it, isn't that what all of us? You can have a gift from God or a gift from Moses. And these muglucks say, oh, we picked Moses. Because why did they want that land? There's a couple of reasons. Why would they want that land instead of going across the Jordan?
Nobody was going to invite them to get there.
Nobody's going to fight what? Say, Chuck?
I said they'll have to get wet to get there.
Well, that's it. Did they know what was on the other side of the Jordan?
Yes.
They had never been there.
They never walked it.
No, but they had been told what was.
They had been told.
It's full of giants.
And they can see this land. What's the old two in the hand, worth one in the bush? Is that how it goes? Or one in the hand, worth two in the bush? Is that how it goes, Mark? One in the hand, two in the bush? Yeah. And what's the whole premise of that? One's a sure thing. The other is possibility.
Well, but then you got the grass is always greener. when it's full.
And that's what they saw. He said, why should we take a chance? This is perfect. All this grass, we've got livestock. And when they made this deal with Moses, what did they promise?
That they'd send the fighting men over with the rest of the Israelites.
Okay, turn back to Numbers chapter 26. You got it, Brian?
Yep.
Read verse 7.
Let's see. These are the clans of the Reubenites, and those listed were 43,730.
Okay, now go down to verse 18.
Okay. These are the clans of the sons of Gad, as they were listed, 40,500.
And then verse 34.
These are the clans of Manasseh, and those listed were 52,700.
A total of 136,900 fighting men. And this was just before just before Moses died. He numbered it. 136,930 fighting men. When we get to Joshua 22, we discover that only 40,000 of those 136,000 went. 96,000 stayed home. 96,000 stayed home. And what was their excuse? We got to take care of the stuff here. We can't go over there and fight. We've got livestock, we've got houses, we've got land, we've got families. We got to protect them. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. And when they start taking the land, conquering the peoples, and getting the spoils, what happens to those 96,000 that stayed on the other side?
They got jealous.
Joshua made sure that every one of those 96,000 received an equal amount of the spoil. That was the kind of man he was. Now, a lot of people would say, sorry, we took the chances, we're reaping the benefits. Somebody else that was close to that same scenario that did the same thing. Remember who that was? David. Before he became king, his men were exhausted, but the Philistines, one of those other tribes that was against the Israelites, had captured the women, the children, and their belongings, and the men were exhausted. David said, I'll just take whoever wants to go. And they left, I think it was 400 behind. And they went in, got everything back. And the soldiers said, no way, Dave. We risked it, we're keeping it. Dave said, no, you're not. You're sharing with those that didn't go. Tremendous lesson. Now, throughout the period of the Judges, these three, you got a map of your own. These three tribes are going to have trouble. They're
It's up there now.
they're never going to get to Jerusalem to worship. They're going to be the first Israelites that are carried into slavery by Assyria. They just turn over to Judges chapter 5. And Marilee, would you read verses 15 through 17?
The princes of Issachar came with Deborah and Issachar, faithful to Barak, into the valley. They rushed at his heels. Among the clans of Reuben there were great searchings of heart. Why did you sit still among the sheepfolds to hear the whistling for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben there were great searchings of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why did he stay with the ships?
Asher.
Asher sat still at the coast of the sea, staying by his landings.
Yes. Searchings of the heart. We have too many church people who have just enough Christianity to be miserable. They don't have enough to make them happy. They've not found yet a fullness of Jesus that fills their heart. They are still resisting control because they want to keep a semblance of doing what they want to do. They live in their old comfort zones, controlled by their old habits. And they're fighting all the time. They're fighting with old things because they've not turned their lives over completely to Jesus. And as a result, keep doing that. And as a result, they never cross that Jordan into the land that God has promised. Do you seriously believe that if they would have trusted God enough to obey him and cross the Jordan with the other 9.5 tribes, that God would have blessed them as richly or more so than by staying on the other side of the Jordan? Yeah. But you see, they didn't believe it. How many times have we said, trust and obey? And when you give yourself over, you'll never regret it. Now, in verse 16 and 17 of Joshua 1. You got that, Kim? Joshua 1, 16 through 18, then we'll be done.
He answered Joshua, saying, all that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Anyone who rebels against your command and does not obey your words and all that you command him shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. 4 ways that the people of Israel, they're getting ready to go. 4 ways they're encouraging Joshua. And the first way they do it is right there in verse 16. How do they encourage Joshua in verse 16?
Loyal.
Yeah. In fact, what do they say?
Your wish is our command.
Your wish is, if you say it, we're going to do it. That's got to build you up. Second of all, the second way they encourage Joshua is in verse 17. And what do they do there?
We'll do like we obeyed Moses.
Yeah, there's a phrase they use there. Only may, what? Only may,
The Lord your God be with you. just
yeah,
like
they're praying. They said, we're going to pray for you. I tell you, the best thing that you can do for people who lead is pray. Is pray. Boy. Years ago, Corey Ten Boom said this great question: is prayer your steering wheel or your spare tire? I like that. Number 3, verse 18. The third way that they're going to encourage Joshua.
Anyone who rebels will be put to death.
Yeah, if they're not going to follow you, let's kill them. What are we saving them for? And the last way is what? Verse 18.
Be strong and courageous.
Yes, they remind Joshua of what God had said. And that's a great encouragement. Remind God what he said. Don't quote what he said and then say, what do you think about that? That always puts me on the spot, Brian. Okay, that's it. We're done. I got one last tune in and then I'm finished.